Hi. Could be. May well be the case. Could have happened. It's likely. Might have been. Should be. May have. It's possible. And there's lots more words like this that mean absolutely nothing at all. These are the words that solicitors, barristers, judges, politicians use to pacify us, to prove a point, to make their case, but there is no certainty about any one of those words, and you will find these words in lots of legislation across the range. Doesn't really matter what country you are from. Hi, I'm Gene from maverickstar Observatory, and I'm inviting you to grab yourself a coffee or a tea or whatever it is that you like to drink and come and have a word with Uncle Maverick. Before we begin, let's just say a big thanks to those few people, as always, for pledging a bit of support for what we do at the Observatory. You guys know that we are more about what we talk about right now today. We actually have an observatory with lots of equipment that monitor CO2, atmospheric oxygen, the magnetic North Pole position accurately every month on the 17th, so we're about 6 days away from that, as well as a lot of other things like the continuing erupting volcanoes on the 17th of the month. We also, and sometimes throughout the month, we do a Earth Health at a glance update where we look at the latest earthquake over the last 24-hour period and the magnitude associated with that, as well as a lot of other anomalies like jet streams and that. So big thanks to those few people that support us. Now, unlike the words we mentioned earlier, all them uncertainties, one thing will be certain: if we do not do something about the 10,000 plus deficit that we've got at the observatory, I will guarantee you this, that services will be affected from January 2022, and there is 3 months to do something about that. We are a publicly funded observatory, and we can't turn our hands open to organisations and governments for bailouts, because that would put us on that line whether we was doing it for the benefit of the governments or for the benefit of the organisations. What we do here is for the benefit of the general public, and that's why we ask that we get funded by the general public. So there is a link down there if you want to help support us and reduce that deficit. But it needs a few more people to step up definitely to that line if we're going to achieve that target. Remember, there are running costs monthly for the observatory on top of that deficit as it is. So we've got our work cut out for us, but I'm sure if we have a couple of thousand people view these videos every day, I'm sure that there is more than enough people that can afford to put their hand in the pocket and help support what we do here. Because I am confident that what we do is provide a valid service. Anyhow, enough about that. On the way home today, touching on a subject that I mentioned around 12 months ago. We've been in this pandemic for about 19 months now, 20 months. But I said when they first brought out their vaccines that this was something that pregnant women needed to be a little bit sceptical of. And for the reason that at the time they brought the vaccines out, we'd only been 9 months into this pandemic, and there is therefore no way they could have tested what the reproductive mechanisms would have been affected by the vaccine. So there was no clinical trials that they could even possibly say that they'd done before releasing the vaccine onto the general public. So my point there was, I think, as a valid point, means I've studied biology. I do feel that I'm qualified to talk about this, but it did earn me a strike or say that. And I'm not giving anyone advice. I'm not telling anyone to, is a disclaimer, I'm not telling anyone to do anything. Make your own choices based on your own decisions, based on your own logic or reasoning. Make the choices on those aspects, not what you hear me talk about. But I will say this, on the way back from my parents shortly, or an hour or so ago, I was listening to the news, and there was a government, what do they call them, advisors, talking about the fact that pregnant women now need to be vaccinated against COVID-19, and he used the word maybe. He said that if there was a case where they had caught the common cold as well as COVID-19, there may be cause for serious concern. It may well be the case that they could get very seriously hurt or injured, or whatever could be the effects of catching COVID and the common cold at the same time. So you need to get vaccinated if you're pregnant now. And they're saying there's absolutely nothing to worry about. We may have well been in the pandemic now 20 months, and I would still say that even if there had been ongoing research with regards to reproductive matters, that it would still be in its early forms. Now, I know that they would argue that we've threw that much money at it, that we've shortened the time period that it would take to get those test results back to us, and we've got the experts that examine these things before they are released to the general public. Well, that was the case, wasn't it, for formaldehyde, or fluidamide, wasn't it? The contraceptive pill that was given to pregnant women not too many decades ago, that was to prevent them having morning sickness. And we've seen the effects of what that has caused, and the problems that has seriously impacted those directly related to it. And that's what I really want to talk about. Do these people that advise the government really want to take responsibility? Because if they do, stop using these terms like could be, may well have been the case, could have happened, it's likely, might have been, should be, may have, it's possible. Stop using those words. Say it is definitely the case if you're certain. If not, shut your face. If you can't provide the facts, don't provide rubbish or drivel to start off with. And this is what we're living with. It annoys me. It annoys me. I saw today also on mainstream media, I'm sure there's a purpose for them showing us these things here in the UK. And by the way, we are a nation of around about 65 million people, and the island is not sinking. The island is still where it was yesterday, even though there are 65 million people on here, even though there was 1,000 extra added just by the mere fact that they was able to get a great big outboard on the back of a 30-foot boat that nobody saw 20 people carrying across the beach of Calais and chucking it into the Channel waters and making their way over to the UK. Don't tell me, and we're on a bit of a sideline here, but don't tell me all those were legitimate refugees from war-torn countries and their life was in danger. But I just, if we don't address the facts, we're never going to deal with the issues. All we're going to do is allow another 1,000 people into this country, and it's the same for any other country where you are worried or concerned about, migrants coming into your country or refugees or whoever they are. If they're legitimate, then I don't have a problem with that. But I don't think legitimate refugees have the capacity to give traffickers £1,000, £2,000 for a seat on a £6,000 or £7,000 boat that is going to get them across the Atlantic. And don't tell me the gendarmes in France aren't seeing what's going on. I'm sure that the reason why they're allowing all these people to cross the channel is because they don't want simply them there in France. And we may well have pissed the French off here in the UK by leaving the euro and not giving them the billions that we used to. But tough luck. You know what we used to be, and I'm not going to get into the arguments of EU, should we have left, should we be there? I think I've made myself clear on this matter before. But you know what? We was paying the fourth most amount of money than any other country in there, and we was at the bottom of the list, probably the third likeliest to get something back from them. And it has affected industry across the range. And I want to just go on another subject here, just sidetracking just a little bit more. Because remember 7 years ago when the EU brought out that legislation that said we couldn't have vacuum cleaners over the capacity of 1,600 watts. Well, we all know that vacuums are crap if they're around anything lower than 1,600 watts, because the motor just isn't powerful enough to turn the vacuum pump inside them to make them suck up the rubbish. So you either spend twice the amount vacuuming, or you buy a decent vacuum that does the job in half hour and saves you a lot of time. But the point is this: it was all about energy saving. yeah, reducing the demand on the grid, because that was dilapidated, and it still is today. You know, half of our wind turbines aren't turning, producing electricity, and there's thousands and thousands of gigawatts of power that are not being generated as was promised. Yet the energy companies have put up the bills, haven't they, here in the UK and all around the world. Probably if you're here in the UK, they've gone up threefold. Factories are really concerned about this now because they can't afford to be competitive with the rest of the world, because they're paying twice the amount there was last year, this year, for their energy. You know, you just can't continue things like this. But getting back to the point about the vacuum cleaners and this, that and the other, they want us to use more less energy consuming appliances. They want us to use less electricity because it saves the environment. CO2, we don't want to put too much of that into the atmosphere, because, you know, we are really, from their perspective, trying to kill the planet. I've explained we are closer to killing the planet by reducing CO2 levels than we are, you know, pumping them up. And in any case, nature is the boss there, and it will decide what it wants to do with us at whatever particular point in time it wants to do with us. You know, as a part of nature, which a lot of Homo sapiens feel that they're not, you know, but as part of nature, we are part of this nature. Well, I hate doing quote signs, but we are part of nature, and therefore, if at any time nature wants to kick us off its arse, it can do us, just in the blink of an eye. But the point is this: they're driving us all now by 2030 to own electric vehicles, and where are we going to plug those electric vehicles in? How sustainable is electric vehicles? Producing a whole brand new car and doing away with all the combustion engine cars. Why haven't they come up with, you know, 3 motors that fit all the cars? It's only a matter, if you're an engineer or a mechanic, of building a bowel housing that fits older cars so that you can convert that combustion engine into a battery car. Just attach a bowel housing onto the motor, fit that motor therefore onto the other side of what the bowel housing would close onto, would be the gearbox, and you've got an electric car. You just need a battery to power it. Why that isn't seen as being more sustainable than replacing the whole car? And don't forget, energy goes into manufacturing the dashboards, the steering wheels, the pedals, the gear stick, the gearbox, all the transmission, the drivetrain, everything. Energy goes into that. So if you're going to do away with everything, how sustainable is that? You know, it's not viable for everybody to own electric cars. So what really are they telling us? Not everyone can afford a brand new electric car in any case. They start at around about 30,000, go up to 100,000 for some particular types of electric car. I'm not going to advertise who that is. I just hate them cars. And I hate what they're trying to say, because on any given perfect day, they may do the distance that they say they will do, but what happens in the winter when you put the heater on, you put the headlights on, you've got the window wipers going, you're telling me the range is going to be the same when you're consuming all that energy on all those other things? It's just not going to be. They say, and I've looked at this the other day, I looked at all of the arguments for electric cars, how much it costs annually for the electric car, and they based it on 9,000 miles for some reason, but that's not average mileage for everybody in the in the world. Usually most of us do something between 10 and 15,000 miles. So, you know, if it's going to cost £800 a year for you to buy and use an electric car and charge it up from home because it costs more if you use public charge points, then how efficient is it? And when you work out the cost of the car, you break that down over the period of the lifetime of the battery, how much money are you actually saving? Now, is government doing it for the fact they want to reduce CO2 emissions into the atmosphere, or are they trying to help their lobbying buddies that own car manufacturing companies? Oh, again, I won't mention the company name, but is it because they want to help him make more millions? We live in a world, and if you're in the Western country, you will find that most of your manufacturing has disappeared to the Middle East or China or somewhere like that, and we've become service-based. And most of those services in this day and age are training other people how to do the jobs. So what we've got here is a carpenter that can make a wooden cabinet perfect, but now, in order for insurance purposes, shit, I'm going to chop my fingers off next time I do that quote mark. But for insurance purposes, he needs to now have a qualification to say he can build that cabinet. So he goes on a training course, and this is bullshit jobs that have been invented for the sake of inventing a bullshit job and keeping people in work. And the trainer is going to now teach the chicken how to lay eggs, how to make, in this aspect, a carpenter make a wardrobe or a table and chairs or whatever. This is just a load of bullshit, and it's getting out of hand. And if you're not getting sick and tired of it, you know what, and not willing to do something about it, then the only thing I can guarantee you, it won't be one of these words. Maybe, may well be, or could have, or might have, or it's possible. It will be the case that things will definitely get worse for you, and most likely, and I shouldn't have used that word, but will get worse for your offsprings, your future generations to come. How do we tackle the problems? It's simple on one hand and not so simple on the other, because things have to change dramatically. There's something completely wrong with the system that we've got in place, and it will never change as long as that system is still in place. There needs to be something else that replaces it. I've already said that money has passed its expiry date, and it truly and really has. If we want to enjoy technology in the future, we've got to do away with money, because money isn't going to be sustainable for people in the future that don't have jobs, which enables them to, partake in a monetary system and earn some money to partake in that system. There needs to be something else. We can't have everyone on benefits, because that isn't going to help anyone, because that just plunges people into poverty, makes them now more food dependent on food banks than ever. There needs to be something else other than money. Okay, the only people that are going to disagree with us here are 1% of the world's population. These are the Jeff Zuckerbergs, the Bill Gates, because they're at the top of the pecking order. They've got all the money in the world to enjoy this world like a heaven, like it's there in heaven. They can do anything they want to tomorrow. There is no restrictions, because they have all the money in the world to do that. It's all the people at the bottom of the pecking order that have no alternative than to take a low-paid job because there is a surplus amount of workers in that field. There's some bad management taking place here in this country, and like I said, England's not sinking. And despite what you're hearing on the mainstream media about the shortage of drivers and the fuel shortages and the panic buying of toilet rolls and the panic buying of fuel, it really isn't the case, and it isn't as bad as what everybody makes out. What is really the case is the level of poverty in this country, and the gap between the rich and poor are getting bigger and bigger, and the lack of funding for real scientific based organisations like ours. That's really the situation here in the UK. There are stuff in the shops. There is, okay, occasionally you might see a few things missing off the shelves that usually is there, but the country isn't shut down. People are still seem to be managing, although be it, having to cut back further and further on what their initial outlay is every month to keep the family home going. But the only thing that they can really cut back on is their expenditure on luxury items and food, because the bills are always going to be necessary to pay. No one's going to sit there in the living room this winter, apart from the very poorest of poorest people, which are generally the elderly with no electric and gas on, because they've got to keep a bit of food in the cupboards. And we should all be ashamed that that is the case. I've seen this, it's not just here in the UK, it's in America. I've heard stories of people queuing up for nearly 2 kilometres, over 100,000 people, for food, benefits, you name it. This is a global problem now, and the global problem is caused by this 1% of stupid people that have no common sense or even perspective view. It will continue to get worse, I guarantee you that, if it's not addressed. And the only way it's going to get addressed is if we all start sticking together and working together and resolving this issue. I can see, just to give 2 countries, I can see the same problem here in the UK as what we've got in the United States. It's the exact same problem. You know, even if I become the Prime Minister tomorrow, I can't change the legislation without first going to the House of Lords and, you know, the Queen approving it. I can't do that. So even if I am a radical voted in by the public with new ideas and concepts, I can't change a damn thing tomorrow without the approval of the House of Lords or the Queen's approval. You know, I've got to get her royal assent. These people can change it, but they have got to come back from Houses of Lords to the Houses of Parliament, and we can block it that way. So nothing would ever change if one or the other didn't agree. And for me, it needs to go. That system needs to go. And that might appear to some people to say, well, this is almost encouraging dictatorship. Well, let's get fucking real about that. I want to talk about dictatorship. Well, I'll tell you now, somebody owns this government. If you're here in the UK, you know who that person is. They've reigned for 90 years and more. Talk about dictatorships. It amazes me. And, you know, I have to always come back down to the grounded thought that, you know, we can call people who we want, and, you know, you hear the saying, one man's dictator is another man's terrorist. Well, it just depends on what side of the fence you're sitting on, doesn't it? Things have to change because the system doesn't work, and if it isn't working today, it isn't going to work tomorrow, it isn't going to work in 6 months' time, it certainly isn't going to work in 10 years' time. There are dramatic changes that need to come about, and the logic is there before us all. If we want to continue advancements in technology, we know that more jobs will go. We know that more people will be put in harm's way because they can't participate in this monetary system which benefits just 1% of the people. Now, I ask you the question, does that really make any sense that we keep a system going for that 1%? You know, do you want to see half of your salaries deteriorate and be spent on just one thing? Heating your home, keeping the roof over your head, and putting a bit of food on the plates for your families to have? Or did you have ambitions of doing other things in life other than working like a bastard? Give me your comments down there in the section. I hope I've encouraged you to think about the situation that we're all faced with around the world. Doesn't matter what country you're from, New Zealand, Canada, America, Mexico, Brazil, Africa, you know, Europe, Canada, again, Canada. It doesn't matter where we come from. We're all here in this system together, and it needs to change in order for things to get better. Links down there if you want to help support the observatory. We've got a deficit, we've got a deadline, and the service will be disrupted at the end of December, beginning of January. It would be a great shame if that was the case, because, you know, we are 17 months away from possibly the biggest cause of climate change, and that could accelerate at that point in time. So, you know, the only way we can keep you informed is if you help us, you know, stay here. You know, the links are down there in the description where you can help support us with a few quid. And I'll say what I usually do, guys. You enjoy the rest of your evening, and as always, bye for now.